When my mom and dad retired, they got themselves a house in Greece, leaving me to care for the family home on my own. I didn't mind. It was better than trying to buy something on my own. Still, a 2-story home for a single man in his early 30s? That's a bit much. I lost my job during the pandemic, and with prices on the rise, I decided to start renting out parts of the space I wasn't using. There was enough room upstairs to house at least a couple of college students, and a spacious basement for another. Just this large one-room basement that basically covered the entire underside of the building, supported by these thick concrete beams. It wasn't the kind of place I'd usually consider renting out, but I figured it wouldn't hurt to offer, as long as I was honest about the state of things. I spent a good month just preparing the spaces, clearing out the upstairs and moving things from the basement to a long-term storage facility. At first it looked like we had some water damage to deal with, but it turned out to be a false alarm. All in all, it was shaping up to be a pretty painless transition, and the rent would keep me afloat until I could get a proper job. I put out an ad on a couple of socials, one for the upstairs space, large enough to support at least a couple of people, and then the basement. I wasn't really sure about the basement, but I included a few pictures and hoped for the best. The price was cheap too. Cheaper than it should be, I guess. I got a few applications for the upstairs space, but most of them were either really short-term or started arguing about the price. One guy just showed up and tried to walk straight in without calling first. It was a weird time. I didn't get any calls about the basement though, so I figured I'd just screw that up. It was early October when I had a knock at the door. The classic da-da-da-da-da kind of knock. I hurried to open, still browsing job openings on my phone and chewing on a piece of cold pizza from the prior night. It's hard to explain how surprised I was to see what I saw. Most other applicants had been either young guys or college girls. What was now standing in front of me was a family of 4. A mother and father, both in their mid-40s, and 2 young boys ranging from 10 to 14 years old. The mom had this autumn-colored cotton dress with a little ribbon, and the dad had this fancy black overcoat, a white shirt with a red tie. Both kids were dressed up in identical blue shirts. At first, I thought they were there to try and convert me to something. I could easily imagine them with a set of Bibles. Instead, the dad stepped forward, offering me a handshake. I accepted.
Hi there,
he said with a warm smile.
We're the Walters. We're here about the ad.
Oh, hello, I answered. It might get a bit crowded, but you're free to have a look. Sorry about the, I vaguely gestured to my unprepared state, but the dad just shook his head.
Not at all. Hope we're not imposing.
I invited them inside and they went right past the stairs. I figured they just missed it. Excuse me, I said. It's right up here.
Oh, we know,
smiled the mom.
We're here about the basement.
So there's this long wooden staircase that spirals into the basement. It's one of the main reasons I don't like going down there or furnishing the place. That spiral makes it almost impossible to bring down any proper furniture. It's infuriating. But all 4 members of this picture-perfect family stepped down, all composed. They were courteous and respectful, with just the polite amount of excitement. But I got the sense that there was something just off about them. The dad brought out some measuring tape and started checking the walls. They asked me about the lack of windows, the air quality, their ability to bring down some furniture and put up some light fixtures. I agreed to all of it. I still couldn't believe they were actually considering it. This was clearly not a space meant for a family of 4, and they gave the impression that they were pretty well off. There was no reason for them to rent a space like this. Still, as they finished their inquiries, the mother approached me.
Would you mind stepping upstairs and just walking around a bit?
She asked.
We'd like to see how much sound carries through.
A strange way to ask for soundproofing, but I did as she asked. I got up the stairs, put on my heaviest boots, and just wandered around for a bit. After a couple of minutes, I turned the corner only to see all 4 of them standing in the hallway. Picture perfect as always, all with a big smile on their faces.
We're very pleased,
the mother said.
We'll take it.
They signed a 6-month rent agreement, and I got to know them a little better over the next few weeks as they sporadically dropped by. There was Layla, the mother, Anders, the father. The kids were 8 and 12, and Alvin, 13. Apparently, they were in between housing and wanted something small and cheap in the interim. Despite all that, I couldn't shake the feeling that a basement was a strange choice for them. Still, I needed the money, and they were eager to get it done. They even offered to pay a little extra since they were bringing in more people than I'd anticipated. About a week later, they showed up for the official move-in. Layla and Anders insisted on bringing in everything in themselves, and that I shouldn't be bothered with any heavy lifting. Apparently, just letting them stay there was favor enough. They brought in about a dozen pieces of furniture covered in blue tarp in various sizes, along with a dozen or so large cardboard boxes, none of them marked. They put down several hand-woven carpets, the kind you'd see in a large mansion. Layla was a stay-at-home mom, while Anders worked as some kind of security manager for a nearby airport. He worked odd hours, anything from 12-hour shifts to all-nighters and everything in between. He was also on call for most hours of the day and sometimes had to leave with short notice. It was strange, though. One might think a person like that would need space with good cell coverage. But that basement barely had a single bar. There was Wi-Fi, but it was spotty at best. For some reason, none of this seemed to bother them. That first week living with the Walters was not a problem. Most of the time, I forgot they were even there. I only saw them leave the basement a handful of times, and they didn't make any noise. At most, I could hear them stomping up or down that creaky old staircase a couple of times. But that was mostly Anders heading to work. In fact, I never saw Aiden and Alvin leave for school. I figured they were being homeschooled, further pushing the idea that this family might have some kind of religious background. Still, they were hardly an issue. I was still working hard on finding someone to rent the upstairs, but I was having no luck. I'd considered lowering the price, but after the Walters moved in, money was becoming less of an issue. Anders even suggested that I apply for a job at the airport. He knew one of the HR people looking for hires in various departments. Having been jobless for 5 months, I was willing to try pretty much anything. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't telling me the whole story. I kept coming back to one thought: what the hell they were even doing down there? Once, I decided to get a better look at what they'd done with the place. At that point, I hadn't even seen how they decorated it. It was in the middle of the afternoon, and I had no idea whether they were even down there or not. Their car was gone from the driveway. I knocked a couple of times, and when there was no response, I used my key to get down. As I turned the corner, it was deathly quiet and completely dark. I turned on the lights. They all slept in these basic single beds, all spaced out along the easternmost wall. They had a small love-seat couch, along with a couple of basic plastic chairs, facing a thick old TV placed against the wall. There was an empty bookshelf and a couple of scattered carpets along the floor. I could see a few open boxes. There was a bathroom next to the staircase, but it looked unused. No toothbrushes or anything. It took me a few moments to realize that I wasn't alone. The entire family was standing in a line along the southernmost wall, furthest away from the staircase. They were standing in order of size from tallest to smallest, remaining perfectly still, just looking at me. It wasn't until they noticed me seeing them that they reacted. They all looked up at me, putting on a friendly smile.
Can we help you?
Asked Layla.
I hope we didn't make too much noise,
Continued Anders. The kids just nodded in unison. I took a good look at them, but I couldn't figure out what I was looking at. I had no explanation for their behavior. Sorry, I was just gonna check the water pressure, I lied. I tried knocking.
That's all right.
Smiled Anders.
Go right ahead.
Walking back up the stairs, a thought hit me. If they were all down there, why was their car gone? Who'd taken it? I had a number of strange interactions with them over the next couple of weeks. For example, I once found Aiden, the younger of the two brothers, standing in the kitchen. He wasn't doing anything in particular, just standing there, staring at the spice rack. When I asked him about it, he just said he wasn't doing anything. After a while, he turned on his heel and ran back downstairs. I didn't see it, but I heard his little feet thump all the way down the staircase. Another time, I saw Layla standing in the open doorway, leading to the basement. She was just standing there, hand on the doorknob, looking right at me. I said, hello, and she said it right back, but she wouldn't let me out of her sight. When I finally passed from her view, I could hear her running back downstairs. Not just hurrying, running. Another time I saw Anders in the car out on the driveway. I saw him from the upstairs window, just sitting there, hands on the steering wheel, for a good 15 minutes. No radio or nothing, just him alone in his car. But the strangest interaction came one night when I was going to the kitchen to get a Coke. I spotted Layla standing in the kitchen, fridge wide open. I could see her silhouette illuminated by the fridge bowl. Her long black hair, wet from a fresh shower. Standing in a hastily tied bathrobe, her feet bare. At first I didn't see anything strange. She was just standing there. She wasn't getting anything. It was more like she was bathing in the light. I thought about calling out to her, but something about her demeanor made me want to sneak back into my bedroom. Then I saw it. There was something wrong with her ear. Her left ear was about 3 inches higher up than her right one, without her bending her neck. Her scalp seemed lightly tilted, and there was something about the way she moved her fingers that didn't look natural. They pointed in different directions, like her hand was ever so slightly fractured. I just stayed there for a while, looking at her from a distance, watching her shoulders rise and fall as she took deep breaths, inhaling the cold. When she turned my way, I only saw her for a moment, her torso moving first, and her legs following, like a stilted claymation puppet. I managed to slip around the corner and heard her rush back towards the basement, her feet tapping against the hallway carpet in an uneven rhythm. When she got to the door, she stopped. I was leaning against the wall, listening from the other room. I heard her step around for a bit. Then there was a snap, a popping limb, something finding its way back into a socket. Her steps resumed a natural pattern as she hurried downstairs. I just stayed there for a while, trying to keep calm. For all intents and purposes, I might have just been seeing her in a weird light. It was dark and I was sleepy. And yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something unnatural about her. That I'd seen something I wasn't supposed to. From that day forward, I got more suspicious. I didn't go into the hallway at night, and I did my best to avoid the basement door altogether. I tried my best to just put them out of my head. I went back to focus on getting a job and a second tenant for the upstairs space, both of which proved to be a challenge. But I was making progress. The TSA was hiring, for example. Not the most glamorous job, but it'd be solid work. There was a couple of college students who came by to check the upstairs floor, a young couple who needed a place to stay while they finished up their master's degrees. They seemed like solid people, and we got along just fine. They knew the place wasn't the most glamorous, but it was a neat short-term solution while they finished up the upcoming semester. The only problem was the Walters family, who I had yet to introduce them to. I remember knocking on the basement door, having the young couple standing behind me expectantly. Albin, the oldest of the brothers, chimed in with a cheerful, "Come in." As we stepped downstairs, the family of 4 was standing in a picture-perfect 2x2 formation. Mom and Dad in the back, 2 kids in the front, all dressed in their Sunday best, with a freshly printed smile across their faces. The whole scene was so absurd, like some kind of misplaced commercial from the 1950s.
Hello.
Giggled Layla.
Aren't they the most handsome couple, Anders?
They sure are, Layla. What do you think, kids?
And in unison, without skipping a beat, the kids answered,
They sure are handsome.
For the next 20 seconds or so, this uncomfortable silence grew between us. The Walters just stood there, smiling at us, waiting for some kind of response. I wanted to say something, but I couldn't help but to feel that I was missing something obvious. Was Layla's eye color a bit different? Was Albin's face a bit lopsided? Was Ander's missing a finger? Or did he just stand in a weird angle? Maybe they'd been strange all along. Maybe it was only now that I was seeing it. When we finally parted ways, I followed the young couple outside. They both turned to me, their faces ashen. One of them just stuttered, but the other managed to form a few words.
We're not one to judge,
She said,
but those people give me the creeps.
"You won't be seeing much of them then."
Yeah, see, that's my point. Who does that? What kind of family willingly lives in a basement?
"It's only a temporary measure, I assure you. By then, the other chimed in.
What's with the boxes?
He asked.
What's in them?
"Personal keepsakes, clothes, that kind of stuff."
No, I mean, the box that moved, the blue one.
The discussion died down and they said their goodbyes. I got the feeling that they wouldn't be returning anytime soon. Still, their words lingered in the back of my head. A box that moved? Really? How'd I miss that? After countless sleepless nights, I decided to finally get some answers. I had to take a little risk and figure this out once and for all. So one day I slipped a note under the door, informing them that we needed them to clear out the basement for one afternoon while a plumber did some repairs. I looked up a few plumbing things on Wikipedia and referenced a real company, making it look all official and stuff. Later that day, Layla and Anders dropped by holding hands, telling me that they'd be sure to be out for the day.
Maybe we'll go to the zoo.
Smiled Anders. Don't you have work? I asked.
It comes and goes.
He laughed.
We're very fortunate.
Very fortunate.
Agreed Layla.
So very fortunate.
At the designated time, the family was out of the building. They went for a drive in Anders' car, promising to return shortly. I told them it wouldn't take the plumber more than an hour. They seemed a little suspicious when they hadn't seen the actual plumber show up yet, and they let that suspicion hang in the air. Finally, I just straight up lied, giving them a fake name and asking whether they wanted me to call him. Layla didn't call my bluff, luckily, but as they pulled out of the driveway, I could tell I was sweating. I didn't even know what I feared, but my mind kept returning to that night when I'd seen her standing in the light of the fridge. I had no idea what they were hiding or what they might do if I found out about it. But there was a part of me that just wanted to get into my car and drive, and another part of me telling me I was being silly. When they finally drove away, I wasted no time. I hurried downstairs, turned on the light, and started to go through their stuff. It was an invasion of privacy, probably illegal. But if I wanted to sleep soundly again, I had to have an idea about why they were being so goddamn weird. There were a lot of oddities about their space. For example, all their beds were perfectly made, like no one had slept in them. Most of the couches and surfaces were covered in dust. I could tell the TV hadn't been on in a long time. It wasn't even plugged in. There were no phones or phone chargers, no laptops or desktop computers, just a bunch of boxes and underutilized furniture. I did find a Polaroid camera, though, at least 30 years old. I started checking their boxes. Just clothes, it seemed. All variations of what I'd already seen. Identical sets of shirts, pants, dresses, and shoes. At least 4 boxes worth. One box was just full of accessories like earrings, necklaces, glasses, hairspray, and fake nails. Another was full of decorations and knickknacks. Porcelain dogs, family photos, dried sunflowers and roses, both with strange colors and fancy vases. I took my time, carefully placing everything back the way I found it. It was odd, but nothing incriminating or downright unnatural. Still, I remember what that couple had said about a box that moved. I couldn't see anything like it. That is, until I turned to leave. Right by the side of the stairs, resting next to the pristine bathroom, was a large blue styrofoam cooler. It was the kind of thing that kind of blended into the background, like it had always been there. Still, I could clearly remember not owning one of those things. It looked old and torn, like it had been around for years. And maybe I was imagining things, but it looked like it was moving, pulsing, pressing against the surface, making little plastic squeals. There was a sound coming from it, like a low guttural growl pushed through a thin pipe, a sharp, rhythmic noise. It made the cooler rattle and shake ever so slightly. I froze, hoping it would quiet down. I held my breath and waited for it to settle. I slowly stepped back up the stairs. As I rounded the corner and lost sight of the cooler, I heard the styrofoam cover pop off, and the sound became clearer, a loud growl shifting in pitch from high to low, like a singer doing some kind of sick vocal warm-up, trying to find the right pitch. Then something hit the floor with a painful yelp. I stopped dead in my tracks, trying to identify the sound. It was like a cross between a dog and some kind of fox, a sharp, screeching tone. Then it scrambled to its feet. I could hear claws and paws scratch the floor, and something was coming my way, fast. There was something primal in me that told me to run. I hurried up the stairs, only looking back for a short glimpse as I shut the door behind me. saw it for a moment. Something black with a single eye reflecting back at me. Its skin tight and misplaced across the skull. Teeth pointing in all directions, in seemingly random sizes. Black drool dripping off an elongated tongue. A thing wearing the cheap suit of a black dog. As I slammed the door shut, I could hear a car pull up on the driveway. It had been less than 30 minutes. Maybe they had planned to catch me in the act. I heard them come in and head straight for the basement. Meanwhile, I was in the other room, throwing together a small bag with a change of clothes and a toothbrush. The moment I heard the basement door shut, I headed for my car. The moment I got in the car, I saw them step out of the house. They all stood there in the driveway, just looking at me. And right next to them was a beautiful black Labrador, happily wagging its tail. I didn't say a word. I just drove. I had to get some space between us and figure out what the hell I wanted to do. I wanted to go to the police, but there was no way to explain what I'd seen. What could they even do? Kick them out for having a dog? There was even a clause in the rental agreement that allowed them a pet. I had nothing to go on. I decided to spend the night at a motel just outside of town. I needed time to think and sleep without having the threat of something strange living under my feet. I couldn't get that image out of my head. That black thing in a dog suit. Like something trying to remember what a dog looked and sounded like in real time. I checked in at the motel and got a room on the first floor. I crawled into bed, put the TV on, and surfed a bit on my phone. I could feel myself relax for the first time in weeks. But every time I thought about that house and that family, I could feel my pulse stagger. I had no idea what to do or who to call, which is what led me to this site in the first place. A lot of you seem to have seen strange things. I figured I'd post here eventually, but it took me quite some time to build up the courage, mostly because of what happened later that night. I remember a tap on the door. I must have dozed off. I hadn't turned the TV off or brushed my teeth. I just woke up with this sour feeling in my stomach, that something was terribly wrong. I had closed the curtains so I couldn't see who it was. I thought about hiding under the bed or locking myself in the bathroom. My thoughts raced, but I tried to temper them with rational what-ifs. Maybe it was just housekeeping or a concerned manager. Then the knock came again, this time with a voice.
Mister,
Said Alvin Walters.
your mom wants to talk to you.
I didn't answer. For a few seconds, I carefully stepped out of bed, trying my best not to make any noise.
Mom wants to talk to you.
He repeated.
It's urgent.
There was no way they didn't know I was in there. They knew, and they wanted something. And whatever it was, I didn't want to find out. I sneaked to the back of the room as the doorknob started to rattle. I could hear Alvin again. This time, his voice shrunk to threatening lows, like the dark growl of an adult or elderly man.
Mom wants to talk to you.
I pulled open the curtains to a window facing the back of the building. I figured I could climb out the window, but as soon as those curtains opened, my heart skipped a beat. Right there was Anders, the father himself, just inches from the window, standing straight with his neatly tucked shirt illuminated by the sharp light of the single TV screen. An ever-courteous smile cemented on his face. He tapped the window.
Would you mind opening up?
He asked.
It won't take long.
Again, I looked a little closer, and again I could see little details that were just off. A slight droop of the lip that hadn't been there the day before. One eye pulled lower than the other, his hairline further forward than usual, like he'd rushed himself to look like a person. Another knock at the door, another knock at the window. Voices from the front and the back. Hell, maybe even room next door. Little voices, big voices, broken voices.
We just want to clear some things up.
Mom wants to talk.
It's not what you think.
I had to make a break for it, but for that, I needed to decide where to go. So I pulled the front curtains aside to see how many of them were waiting up front. All 5 of them were standing out front. Mom, Dad, kids, and dog. I looked back, as if trying to convince myself I was sane. There were 2 dads, and none of them looked right. Further down the street in their car, I spotted 2 more kids identical to Aiden and Alvin, both with little quirks, like they weren't fully formed yet. A loose jaw, a strange eye. One of them had a wide bald spot. Stepping out of the motel manager's office, I saw another Layla, this one with a deflated arm and a paralyzed face. I was surrounded. I held up my phone like a weapon. "I'm calling the police," I yelled. "Get the fuck away from me,"
That'd be inconvenient,
said Anders.
And you'd be dead, added Aiden.
Long dead.
Chuckled Alvin, his voice not tuned right. The doorknob rattled again, more forceful this time. I could feel my pulse rising, my breath growing short. I looked back and forth, seeing the Anders at the back window, trying to figure out the lock. Only now did I see that one of his fingers were nothing but bone,
How about a trade?
suggested Layla.
Something for everyone.
What the fuck are you talking about?
Go inside that bathroom of yours, grab a piece of tissue and chew on it, then drop it out the window.
What? I couldn't understand what I was hearing. It's like the words were there, but didn't make any sense to me,
We're gonna need a new suit.
said Layla.
You will do.
You're not fucking wearing me.
Oh, we'll leave you alone. And you'll leave us alone. Because if you don't, people that look like you are gonna start doing some terrible things, aren't they, Anders?
Oh, they are, Layla.
Said an Anders.
Terrible, terrible things.
So that way, we can all walk away. You'll never see us again, and we'll leave you be.
I tried to wrap my head around it. They were gonna make suit out of me, like they'd done with that dog, and with that family. There would be someone looking like me, walking around out there. Something vile. But what choice did I have? I stepped into the bathroom and chewed up a piece of tissue. I spat it out and moved to the window. The family stepped back. I clicked the window open and flung the piece of tissue out with a flick of the finger. Layla picked it up and met my eyes with an unblinking gaze. With one clench of the fist, she grabbed the top of her head and pulled. Her entire face lurched backwards, her lower lip reaching all the way to her eyebrows. Underneath was just this black sludge, covering what looked like a deformed skull. She was like a walking oil slick, completely midnight black and slick as water. She pushed the piece of tissue inside herself before pulling her face back down. It took her a few seconds to realign, but she just couldn't get it to look right. She coughed a little. She waited. She nodded. And when she looked back at me, she did so with my own eyes, speaking with my own tongue. "Thank you," I heard myself say. "I think this will work out for all of us, don't you?" I couldn't answer. I couldn't think. I just closed the curtains and scrambled backwards. I heard a car pull around. I heard rustling in the bushes out back. And from afar, I could hear my own voice a final time. "We'll be gone by morning at Waptarenson," it said. But we're never far away. A car drove off, leaving me in stunned silence, my mouth dry from hyperventilating. The next morning, they were gone. The basement was empty, and they even left a thank you note. Attached to it was a Polaroid picture of a happy family. A mom, a dad, 2 kids, and a funny uncle. One that looked exactly like me. And I have been contemplating on whether to share this for some time, knowing what they could do. But I believe they're not technically proficient enough to find this, and I've omitted a lot of details. I just need to know if anyone has met something similar, and if so, how you managed to put it behind you. Are they still out there? Are they watching me? How many suits do they have? I've wanted to just put this behind me and pretend it never happened, but it's getting harder and harder. Every now and then, I see someone that looks vaguely like them, an Anders with a different haircut, a Layla that's slightly younger. School photos with an Aiden or Alvin, but a different hair color. And a few weeks ago, I got a call from a friend mentioning how they'd seen me in the local newspaper. Only thing is, I've never been in it. I've considered moving somewhere far, far away. But first, I just need to get this out. I need someone to believe me. The real me, and not the me you might see in the papers.
Hello and welcome to Daytime, your place for scary stories straight from the horror forums of Reddit. Make sure to like and subscribe for more horror tales of things that go bumping the night. On tonight's episode, a man reflects on his time as a boy when a strange event occurred in his small town. So are you lactose intolerant? If so, you might be one of the lucky ones, because there can be no milk.
A few months ago, the civil township of Wanley, NC, was officially revoked. The area's had a dwindling population for decades, and with less than a dozen people living there as of this writing, the town has been absorbed into a neighboring area. For most people, this is a footnote. No one really knew about Wanley. Hell, even the post office got confused at times. But that town used to be something, and the people who came from there are as real as it gets. I was one of those people, and I want to tell the story of what happened. In the 90s, Wanley was the home to approximately 3,800 people. The main export was corrugated steel roofing sheets, produced by the Wanley Metalworking Roofing and Tiles. There were the 2 dairy farms, the Ansons and the Bows. We also had a small barley and wheat refinery, a high school, 2 large off-site admin offices, and one of those small-scale business incubators. Apart from that, there wasn't much to see in Wanley. Just this flat chunk of land amid a big pile of nothing. In those days, people were already leaving town. Businesses were split between Fayetteville and Roseboro. A lot of people figured that there was no point making big investment plans for a town that was bleeding out. Hell, even Wanley Metalworking considered relocating south to Wilmington, abandoning their namesake. But despite all that sour gloom, it wasn't industry decisions that caused the downfall of Wanley. I was 13 years old in 1993. I grew up with my mom Raniele, Ronnie for short, and my dad Morgan. My little brother Amos had the room right across the hall. He was just 10 years old at the time. It was the last month of middle school. The following autumn, I was supposed to study at Wanley High. But for all of primary school, we had to take a bus out of town. It took us about 25 minutes one way. Not too bad, but it singled us out. Us Wanley kids were a unit at that point, arriving and leaving in unison. It was a Friday afternoon in late May. I was on the school bus, on my way back home. There were these 2 kids in front of me who couldn't stop talking about their latest Super Nintendo game, Star Fox, I think. I'd zoned out their entire conversation, instead opting to stare out the window. When we got to the Wanley town sign, I noticed something strange. There was a man from the sheriff's office using a roller to add something to the sign. All I saw was the word "no." There were several police vehicles blocking the road into town. I recognized the faces of the officers, but I hadn't talked to them before. There weren't a lot of criminals in Wanley, and my family were all on the straight and narrow. Even my dad, who joked about being a bank robber, he wasn't. He was a corporate lawyer. The bus stopped, and so did the conversation. No more Star Fox. The double doors at the front of the bus whooshed open, and an older policeman stepped on board with his hands on his walkie-talkie. He looked at the driver and nodded, then turned to us.
Hey there, kids,
he said.
I'm Officer Gellin. We're not going to keep you here too long. We just need to have a little talk, if that's okay. Is that okay, kids?
There was a muttering, "Yes," coming from the Wanley Middle School children, myself included. Officer Gellin nodded, hiding a wide smile under a wild mustache.
All right, I'll be right back. Sir, would you accompany me outside for a sec?
The driver stepped outside with Officer Gellin. Meanwhile, the rest of us kept looking around, trying to see what was wrong. "Maybe there's an accident," said one of the younger kids. "Maybe someone got hurt." "I think there's a fire," said another. "Mom says we can't barbecue because of fire hazard." "Maybe there's a murderer," said the Star Fox kid. "And they found like heads and stuff." "Gross," I added. "You're gross." I looked back outside as the other kids started to squabble. It went from fire to accident to murderers to space aliens, then right back to talking Star Fox. Meanwhile, I stared off in the distance, and that in turn gave me an idea. I could see the back of the town sign from the rear window. I leaned back and looked out. The sign read, "You're now leaving Wanley," but there was a large white text added to it. "No milk." Before I got the chance to tell the other kids, Officer Gellin came back on board. The driver got back in his seat.
I had a very productive talk with Mr. Harley here, and he tells me that I've stumbled upon a particularly crafty and well-behaved group of students. Is he right about that? Is that what you are?
Of course we were. In unison, we agreed with Officer Gellin.
Well, in that case, you might be able to help me out. See, we're looking for a special something that we can't bring into town or people might get sick. And we wouldn't want anyone to get sick now, would we?
Of course not.
Then I hope you won't mind some of my officers checking your backpacks to make sure nothing bad snuck along, would you?
2 officers stepped on board as Gellin hurried outside to halt an approaching sedan. Someone was trying to get out of town, but was turned away. One by one, the officers had a short talk with us and went through our backpacks, our lunches specifically. When they got to the Star Fox kid just ahead of me, I heard them asking him a series of questions. What he'd been eating, how long ago, if he'd gone to the bathroom since. Strange questions. Turns out he had chocolate milk as part of his lunch. The officer who asked clicked his walkie-talkie twice, some sort of discreet signal. When they got to me, I handed them my backpack.
Have you had anything to drink today?
He asked. My mom made lemonade, I said.
That sounds great. Wish my mom made me some.
He smiled.
Anything to eat? Any cheese? Any milk?
Just fish sticks and rice, I said, and ketchup.
Doesn't sound too bad.
He rummaged through the backpack and seemed relieved not to find what he was looking for.
All right, looks like we're done. You have a good weekend now.
You too. Once they'd gone through every backpack, they circled back to the Star Fox kid. They asked him to come along and said they had to ask a couple more questions. It was scary. He started crying, and they tried to encourage him every step of the way. They said they were going to call his parents, and everything was going to be fine, and I wasn't so sure. Once the bus started rolling, I looked back to see Officer Gellin in the rear window. He wasn't smiling at me. He had this grim look on his face, staring straight into the asphalt, motionless. There was a long line of cars being turned away. Some cars I recognized. Friend and neighbors looking to make a quick exit. The bus had to pull to the side at one point to let a fire truck pass. I got the impression that something big had happened, but no one was telling me what it was. The conversation had died down, and I had to fill the silence with my worries. There was no chatter to distract me. By the time we got to the bus stop, I saw all our parents lined up, my mom and dad included. Amos was also there. He'd taken an earlier bus and had been home since lunch. As I stepped off, my dad swept me up in his arms. Mom was crying.
What did they do?
Dad asked.
Did they take anything? What did they ask you?
Mom took me from him.
Give it a rest, Morgan.
She spat.
Let's go home.
Amos seemed disinterested, instead clutching a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles comic that they'd bribed him with. There was a man in camouflage with an assault rifle walking up and down the street, asking people to disperse and return to their homes. Mom and Dad hurried back to the car, sticking me and Amos in the back. He went straight to reading his comic book, but I kept looking out the window. As we got back on the road, heading home, I noticed several strange signs. The most prominent one was on the window of a corner shop. No milk, by order of the National Guard. When we took the road by the Bo's dairy farm, I heard popping noises. Before I got the chance to ask, my dad intervened.
They're celebrating,
He said.
It's just fireworks.
We lived at the end of a street, next to a roundabout. We had 3 neighboring houses. 2 of them were elderly couples who rarely left their homes, and the last was another family with a teenage boy. We'd hung out a bit before he started high school, but we'd fallen out of touch in the last year or so. Still, I had fond memories of watching movies on their big screen TV and playing video games. I bet they had the new Star Fox game. As we turned the corner, the street was in chaos. The Masons were out on the lawn, arguing with 2 fire marshals. The other elderly couple, the Stevensons, were dragging bags to their car. The other family was nowhere to be seen, and their SUV wasn't in the driveway. Their front door was half open and the lock broken. There was a piece of white paper with red text nailed to the side of the door.
Just go to your room,
Dad said.
We'll talk over dinner.
But what's going on? I asked.
We'll talk about it later,
He insisted.
For now, I need you to stay in your rooms.
Amos looked up from his comic book.
Can I play Nintendo?
As long as you want, honey.
Mom smiled.
And tonight, there's no bedtime.
Amos looked up at me like we were going to Disneyland. It took him a moment to realize that he was the only one smiling, and he didn't understand why. To be fair, neither did I. We hurried inside. Amos and I ran upstairs and got to our rooms. Amos had been allowed to keep the Super Nintendo in his room, while I had a VCR. It was fair enough. He could play games and I could watch movies. But I wasn't in the mood to watch anything. I had this sinking feeling that something was terribly wrong, and I kept looking out the window, hoping to see something. The Stevensons were arguing next to their car, and the Masons were being ushered back into their house. I could see smokestacks rising from the dairy farms and flashing lights from fire trucks going back and forth down Main Street. Every now and then, if I listened closely, I could hear popping noises. It didn't sound like fireworks. It sounded like gunshots. I'd only been in my room for a couple of minutes before I heard a careful tapping at the door. Amos stepped in with this haunted look on his face, his eyes wide and unblinking.
Can you help me with my science project?
He asked.
It's acting funny.
Amos had been working on a science project for school. It wasn't a big deal. He'd taken different kinds of milk and placed them in cups to see which ones went bad first. He usually checked it before he went to bed, making notes about changes over time.
Can you please look?
He asked.
It's really weird.
All right. For something to make Amos say please, it had to be something out of the ordinary. I walked across the hall to his room, catching a whiff of an argument downstairs. Mom had raised her voice. There was a certain pitch to it when she was worried about something. She wasn't holding back this time. It made me feel sorry for Dad. Half the time, it wasn't even him she was angry at. I followed Amos past the pause screen for Contra 3 and up to the window. He had the cups resting on a small metal tray with plastic wrapping. He stopped just ahead of it. I heard this noise, and he pointed at the cups, clutching his notebook.
I haven't opened it. Mom says it smells too much.
As I approached, I saw the cups rattle. Not much, but enough to make a noise. I could see the plastic wrap shaking. Looking into the cups, it took me a while to understand what I was looking at. At first I thought it was maggots, but it wasn't. It looked like something had coalesced at the bottom of each cup, and there were these tiny white strands shooting out of it, prodding the plastic for weaknesses. It sort of looked like an egg, in a way, with these inches-long strands that moved independently of one another. All of it milky white.
It keeps moving,
he said.
Look!
He stepped up to it and put his finger on top of the plastic. The strands in the cup immediately reacted, shooting straight up. It looked almost electric in a way.
Why does it do that?
He asked. Don't touch it, I said, and we gotta put it away.
Should we tell Mom?
I could hear them arguing downstairs and shook my head. We should throw it away, I said. Let's flush it. Amos protested all the way to the bathroom, but didn't want to make a fuss. I told him I'd take the blame, and he could go back to playing Contra. That seemed to do the trick. I placed the tray on the floor next to the toilet. I put on Mom's plastic cleaning gloves just in case. As I took off the plastic wrap, those little white strands shot out of the cup, aiming straight at my face. They were a lot longer than I'd suspected, just inches away from my face. I panicked and dropped the entire cups down the toilet with a squeal. Looking down, they squirmed and twisted back and forth, these white strands whipping back and forth, like worms in agony. They were so much longer than I'd anticipated, and I could feel them prodding against the plastic gloves. They were looking for the warmth of my skin. The tips were much sharper than anticipated, and almost poked a hole in my gloves. I flushed. After waiting a few seconds, I could still see some strands moving at the bottom of the bowl. I flushed again and again and again. Finally, when there was nothing left, I dumped half a bottle of toilet cleaner in, flushed again, and then waited. I must have sat there for 10 minutes, just watching the water. There was this tingle in my spine, like I'd escaped some great danger. The same kind of rush you'd get if you'd nearly stepped on a snake or seen a bear. I went back to my room and brought out a notebook. No milk, I wrote at the top. I tried to name all the places in town where there might be a lot of milk or milk-based products. The dairy farms were obvious, but there was also the high school cafeteria, the corner shop with the soft serve machine, and the convenience store. Since this was a town with several dairy farms, milk and cheese was sort of everywhere. I listed at least 24 locations where there might be a lot of dairy products. There was a loud banging on the front door downstairs. Amos and I rushed out of our rooms to see what was going on. From upstairs, I saw Dad open the door to a man in military uniform. Mom looked up the stairs.
Get back to your rooms.
She said.
We'll tell you when you can come out, all right?
Mom, what's going on?
Just play your games.
She said.
Wait there.
But Mom,
Rooms!
She yelled.
Now!
She wasn't messing around. Amos and I looked at one another and silently decided to stick together on this one. There was a discussion between my parents and the man at the door. Amos and I retreated back to my room. He tried reading, but he kept getting distracted.
You think it's bad?
He asked, putting down his comic book. Amos had always been a bit of a pain. Lots of pranks and scares, but this time was different. We weren't playing around. It was like a silent agreement. Yeah, I said, I think so.
Why? What's so bad?
I think there's something wrong with the milk.
But you flushed it, right?
Not just that milk, I said, all of it, all milk in town.
It's all gone bad?
Worse, I said, like real bad. What happened next was quick. I heard someone coming up the stairs, and in the next moment, my parents opened the door to my room. They asked us to remain calm. They asked us to be quiet. They asked us to come along, stay close, and don't ask any questions. On our way out, I saw the man in uniform stepping into our upstairs bathroom. Seconds later, he sprinted back out, yelling into his walkie-talkie. Mom and Dad hurried us downstairs. 3 other men rushed past us, up the stairs, dragging dirt and mud through the living room carpet on their way up. All in uniform, all armed with assault rifles. They left the front door open, and I could see at least 6 more people waiting outside. We got in our car, taking nothing with us except Amos's comic book. A man tapped the driver's seat window with his rifle, and my dad took off down the road.
We can't get out of town,
Mom said, keeping her voice low.
Morgan, they're testing women at the checkpoints.
Maybe it's for the better,
Dad said.
Who knows how this can affect you? You might need a vaccine.
You've seen what they did with the dairy cows. They take them out back, and then...
We are not cattle, Raniel. They're not putting people, Ranny, out to pasture.
Then where the hell are the goddamn Abernathys? Them being dragged off was just for fun? For show?
We're not having this discussion,
Dad said.
Not in front of the kids?
I'm almost in the 2nd trimester.
She whispered.
And God knows what they'll do if they...
Mom quieted down, holding a hand to her mouth. Dad looked at her with a mix of pity and frustration.
I feel strange, Morgan.
She continued.
And it's not like last time.
There's this big 4-way intersection in the middle of the downtown area. When we got to that point, the lights had turned red. There were these military trucks going by, one by one, at least a dozen, covered in blue plastic tarps. Long after the lights turned green, the trucks were still going by. As the second to last truck was going by, there was this loud metal bang, and the entire truck started moving. For a moment, we all thought it was going to tip over. 2 of the wheels were off the ground, tipped back down, and the driver leaned on the horn. From seemingly every corner of the street, armed men started shouting at us to move. I could see something moving under the tarp, something sharp poking and prodding against the plastic. I'd seen it before. Dad stepped on the gas, going the other way. I saw the high school gymnasium in the distance, lined with vehicles all along the street.
They told us to stay here,
Dad said.
Let's just hunker down and wait.
We'll be trapped.
We can leave at any time.
We can't go by foot. I don't like the look of those rifles.
You know they wouldn't.
They exchanged a glance, and the conversation stopped. Amos and I just kept our heads down. There were still popping sounds outside. They were closer now. Dad found a spot further down the street, and we made our way to the gymnasium. There were at least 100 people gathered outside. I picked up a few things from various discussions going around. For example, the armed men were from the National Guard. Most of them had shown up early that morning, probably minutes after I'd left for school. There was a lot of talk from a lot of people. A soldier explaining something about lactic acid bacteria to one of our science teachers. An old man complaining about how they took his freezer. A kid being scolded for not telling his mom he had a milkshake with his lunch. A farmhand looking distraught, saying something about the new cow feed used at the Anson farm. and how it was unfair for the bows to get shut down. Bits and pieces of 100 different stories. But what struck me the most was a group of young women looking distraught. One of them kept repeating the same thing over and over to a soldier.
I'll never get rid of it.
She asked.
It's in there? For good?
We had to sign our names on the way in. Dad signed for the 4 of us. I barely recognized anyone. They'd set up green military cots, 2 by 2, with a basic footlocker for valuables and personal belongings. Dad weaved between aisles of cots, keeping me and Amos close. Mom was looking for the restroom.
When can we go back to the house?
Amos asked.
They're checking the pipes.
Dad said.
That can take a while.
Checking the pipes for what?
I don't know, but whatever it is, they're making sure we're okay.
A stone sunk into my stomach. Maybe what I'd flushed down the toilet had gotten stuck in the pipes somehow. Maybe that's what they saw. For the next few hours, we stayed put. They handed out a couple of basic dairy-free meals. Once every 2 hours, there were a couple of soldiers walking down the aisles, making sure everyone looked okay. But people were far from okay. I saw this one athletic guy shaking like a leaf, coughing into his hand over and over. It sounded awful, like his body was trying to push something out. When the patrol made their rounds, they took him outside. I didn't see him again. Mom was in the bathroom for a long time, at least an hour. When she got back, she had this slightly ashen complexion, like she hadn't slept for days. Dad was worried, but she kept telling him she was okay. Once it started to get dark, the patrol said they were closing down for the night. A curfew was in effect. Dad had all kinds of questions, but didn't want to start arguing with armed soldiers. I could tell he was holding back. Corporate lawyer or no, personal freedoms are a big sticking point to him. I remember this big clock over the scoreboard. If you managed to filter out the cries and the occasional scream, that clock was the only thing you could hear. And I could swear that the seconds were getting longer the more you listened to it. Mom and Dad shared a cot, while Amos and I got one each. Amos went out like a light, but I stayed up long after midnight. I couldn't help it. That damn clock kept me up. With the lights off, all I saw was the sharp shadows cast by the crescent moon creeping in through the cloud cover. As the screams and cries turned to sniffles and snores, I was left awake staring into the ceiling. I heard people whispering about megabacteria, something in the methane, the lactic acid, the gas lines. Nobody knew for sure. There was one guy who kept muttering about birds being the source, claiming it had rained feathers moments before shit hit the fan. There was this one drunk man by the exit who kept talking out loud to himself.
They dance like skinny little worms reaching for the stars.
Skinny little worms. Just like I'd seen in my brother's science project. I'd been drifting in and out of sleep for 1 or 2 hours when I snapped to attention. I heard someone running past me and looked up to see Mom's side of the cot empty. Dad sat up, rubbing the sleep out of his eyes.
Ronnie?
He whispered. He noticed me looking his way.
You see where Mom went?
I shook my head. He got up and took me by the hand.
Let's go look.
We went down the aisles, hand in hand. It was eerie watching all these strangers sleeping around us, like nothing was going on. Even the drunk guy by the exit was out cold by now. I don't know if I was imagining things, but I had the mental image of those skinny little worms appearing. Sometimes, when I looked at the sleeping people, I imagined little shadows scurrying to hide. Something crawling out of a nose, an ear, a mouth. We walked past this one man who looked sick, who had a metal bucket next to his cot. I could hear little tapping movements at the bottom of it, as if something was struggling to reach out.
She might be in the bathroom,
Dad said.
Let's go look.
There were 2 patrolmen by the bleachers, smoking and telling stories. They kept passing a bottle back and forth. Dad kept his head down, making sure not to look them in the eye. We went through a short hallway and made it to the bathrooms. The power was still on, but all the lights were off, making the emergency exit sign the only thing to guide us. Dad was about to step inside the bathroom when I tugged on his sleeve. "That's for ladies, Dad," I said.
I'm sure they won't mind.
We stepped through the door. Moonlight was coming in from a frosted glass window, casting an eerie shadow across the floor. We split up and started knocking on the stalls. It was quiet. Dad had this worried look on his face.
Maybe you should step outside for this,
He said.
just for a while.
Let's check, I said. It'll be quick.
Wait, let's...
I opened one of the stalls. I barely saw anything. In the moonlight, I couldn't see much more than outlines. I saw a pair of still hands holding up a bloated belly with these dancing little worms pushing their way out of the skin. Like a goddamn human garlic press. The tapping sound of 100 thin parasites looking for a new host. Some were just an inch long, others were as tall as an arm. One of them poked the nail on my thumb, but couldn't latch on. I saw chunks of hair strewn across the floor, a side effect of late-stage infection. A hand fell over my eyes, and I was dragged outside. When I looked up, I saw Dad. His entire body language had changed, like he was in pain. For a few seconds, all he did was stare at me. Then, there was a bang on the door, coming from the inside.
I need you to get your brother,
He said.
I need you to get your brother, and I need you to get to the car.
But Dad, what?
Here,
He handed me the card.
I'm trusting you, and I need you to hurry.
But what about... Another bang on the door. Dad straightened his back and pushed it shut. I stepped back, feeling my pulse rise through my chest.
Go!
He yelled.
I'll meet you outside.
Running back out, some of the cloud cover had cleared outside. I started running down the aisles, trying to find my way back to Amos. It was difficult. Everything looked different in the dark. There was this woman who got out of her cot just a few feet ahead of me. She coughed, and this avalanche of worms trickled out of her mouth. They spilled onto her chest and scattered across the floor. She turned to me, chunks of hair coming off her scalp. She wheezed at me, her brown eyes tired from crying. She tried to say something, to call for help. But all I heard was that inhuman wheezing, as little white worms made their way across her chest. I don't know if I was the one who started it, but someone did. That first scream, that choir of screams as lives came crashing down. There were so many parasites, so many victims. Some who'd just felt funny and tried to sleep it off, waking to a nightmare. Others had tried keeping their sickness a secret. There were no patterns, no limits. Everyone was susceptible. Young, old, strong, frail. There were some with parasites coming out their stomachs, others through the ears, mouth, and nose. There was this one man who had them in his left eye. As they reached out to others for help, the parasites spilled from one person to the next, burrowing into their skin. I didn't find Amos. He found me. He kept telling me that a bad man had taken his comic book, and that he ran away looking for Dad and help. He asked 100 questions at once, but I just grabbed him and ran, clutching the car keys so hard that my hand cramped. We made our way to the exit, but there was a rush of people going in and out like a waterfall. Someone yelled, telling people to drop to the floor. 10 others screamed back, begging for help. Others just screeched like wounded animals trying to alert the flock of incoming danger. Amos ducked to the floor and I followed him. Then the gunshots started. We got out by crawling on all fours. One of the soldiers tripped over me, accidentally kicking me across the ribs. When we got outside, we stuck to the wall and kept a low profile. Amos couldn't stop crying, but I just pulled him along. I could barely hear anything over my ringing ears and pounding pulse as gunshot after gunshot rang out behind us. We crawled our way through the flower beds, using the high school's blue sunflowers as a cover. Most people were stuck inside. Some made their way out, filtering back into the military tents outside. Amos and I made our way back to the car. My fingers barely worked as I fumbled to open the door. When I finally did, I could see more people heading our way from down the road. I got the car open and pushed Amos into the back seat. I followed him, locking the doors from the inside. We curled into the leg space between the back and front seat, hugging each other tight as I hushed him. He couldn't stop crying. He had so many questions piling up that they were overflowing into a jumbled mess. Questions about Mom, about Dad, about the people outside, about the bad man who took his comic book. As the gunfire died down, people started pouring out. But they weren't just people anymore. One of them noticed our car. One of them spotted us inside. And after that first one came another and then another. In less than half an hour, there were so many of them they were blocking all the windows. All I saw were silhouettes, and all I heard were wheezing noises. Bodies calling for help, begging, pressing themselves against the windows to get at us. Rattling coughs over and over, as something inhuman settled in their throats. I could only see parts of them as they banged on our windows. There was this one man smiling at me with little worms dancing between the gaps in his yellow teeth. He pressed himself against the passenger window, meeting my gaze.
Batman!
He groaned.
Batman! Help!
An eternity passed in the back of that car, and sometime during that eternity, the noises stopped. Maybe they moved on. Maybe they got shot. I don't know. But at some point, the sun broke through, and we were both okay. Panicked, but okay. There were soldiers outside, rounding up people from the gymnasium, and people from the tents. Some were sent back home after signing some documents. Others were asked to stay near their vehicles until further notice. And me? Well, I refused to open the door for anyone. Amos and I stayed in there for hours until we could feel the heat baking us. Then, the door opened. My dad had a spare set of keys. Seeing his familiar face outside the passenger side window was everything I needed to know that in some way we'd be okay. He'd locked himself in one of the stalls and kept quiet all night. Looking back at it, he and everyone else were forced to sign some kind of agreement. We were given a hefty compensation, and all we could say was that it was killer bacteria coming from one of the dairy farms, which in a sense was true, but it didn't tell the whole truth. And it took Dad years to build up the courage to tell me what really happened to Mom. 6 years, I think. Apparently she was pregnant, but the whole thing had been a bit touch and go. They didn't want to tell us until they were sure. She was just at the point where her body had started lactating. Milk protein just... I don't know. I can't shake the feeling that maybe it was her that I saw in that stall. Dad took the money and left town. He and so many others. Some moved in, encouraged by the sudden price drop. I guess that's how the town made it all the way to 2023. 176 people died in total, directly or indirectly. But what they don't tell you is that thousands were permanently scarred. Some of the girls who'd just entered puberty had to get sterilized, or they might risk another outbreak years down the line. They did some tests on me as well, but determined I was fine. Amos, too. Guys are affected differently. I still have that bacteria in me in some capacity. While I can eat and drink dairy nowadays, there's that part of me that just can't bring myself to try. The thought of reliving any part of that day gives me this sickening feeling in the pit of my stomach. I feel my pulse rising just thinking about it. Seeing that white liquid fills me with the sense that there is so much moving around in it that I just can't see. If it hadn't been for what happened that day in 1993, I think Wanley would have been fine. But as it stands, I'm glad it's finally gone.